My name is Hank Coulter. I'm a farmer out in the Ozarks, in a place we call Ash Hollow. I wasn't born rich. My folks weren't either. We ran cattle, raised hogs, grew vegetables, and did things the hard way, same as everyone else in these parts. I was working the same land my dad did before me, and his dad before him. My wife Beth, our daughter Sadie, and I lived quietly and honestly, keeping to ourselves, putting in long days, and hoping that someday they'd add up to something. Back then, our ranch was modest, no different than 24 others along the ridgeline. But if you drive through Ash Hollow now, you'll see my name on more gates and more land than anyone else. Folks say I got lucky. Truth is, I made a deal with the devil, because 5 years ago, something came out of the woods, and I'm the reason it stayed. This is my confession. The first time I heard talk about something strange in the woods, it was over lukewarm coffee at the feed store. Nothing unusual at first, just the usual swapping of stories between ranchers, tired and sore from morning chores. One fella claimed something tore the door clean off his barn in the middle of the night. His livestock guardian dog, a big Anatolian mix, was found mauled and half-eaten, shredded like it had gone up against a wood chipper. 2 of his goats were missing entirely. There were drag marks leading into the woods at the edge of his property. This didn't sound like any predator known in the area. Whatever it was must have been both strong and smart. It came with purpose, broke in, and took what it wanted. Another farmer swore he'd been hearing howls coming from the ridgeline every night lately, a sound deeper and more drawn out than any coyote. Said it made the hair on his arms stand straight up. Others began opening up too, talking about tracks, missing pets, strange shapes caught in the headlights of their trucks. They were all a little unsettled, but didn't take it too seriously. I laughed along with them, said it was probably just a rogue wolf or a sick bear. Spring always brought nerves. After all, it's the season when fences sag, predators get bold, and folks need something to blame when calves go missing or chickens turn up dead. But even then, I remember feeling something wasn't right. The stories were coming too close together, too frequent, and too detailed. These weren't drunk campfire yarns or secondhand gossip. They were first-hand accounts from men who didn't scare easily. Still, I chalked it up to group hysteria. Rural folks can be as superstitious as anyone once a rumor gets going. I figured it'd pass like it always did. I was wrong. It didn't stop. It got worse. And eventually, it came to my door. You have to understand, I've seen wolves before. We've had bobcats and the occasional black bear too. None of those animals left behind what this thing did. The first sign was tracks. Massive, 5-toed prints the size of a size 14 boot, spaced far apart, as if the creature that made them was walking upright. They weren't paw prints, not even close. The toes were too long, almost like fingers, and each one ended in a deep, distinct claw mark. Next came the mutilations. Something got into my neighbor's chicken coop and didn't just take the birds. It tore them apart and spread the pieces around his house like it was making a point. Then there were the dogs. People around here keep hounds, working breeds, tough animals. They started going missing one by one. Lots of barking every night for seemingly no reason. Then, the next day, they were gone. No struggle, just gone. A week later, they'd find a collar somewhere in their yard, or even on their back porch. By the time the first person vanished, nobody was laughing anymore. A retired surveyor named Dale Harper went into the woods one morning to scout hunting grounds and never came back. They found his GPS smashed and his pack torn open, but no body, just more of those strange tracks in the soft riverbank mud. His wife moved to her sister's in Springfield within the week. We all knew something was out there, something that wasn't just an animal, or at least not one we understood. It wasn't just the size or the tracks or the way it ripped through heavy wooden doors. It was the feeling you got when it was near, like your skin knew it before your brain did. The forest would go still, the birds would stop, and you'd feel eyes on you from a place you couldn't see. People began calling it the Ash Hollow Stalker. It's as good a name as any. It hunted only at night, always just outside the range of porch lights and rifle sights. You could catch a glimpse of it if you were unlucky. Tall, gray, hunched, with eyes that reflected yellow when they found light. It moved wrong, fast and silent, like a shadow that decided to stand up and walk. It wasn't long before the thing's presence became impossible to ignore. The attacks grew bolder. More livestock vanished. Fences and doors were torn apart, and people began to realize this wasn't going to stop on its own. Every night you'd hear it in the woods, long guttural howls that started low and rose up like a warning siren. They'd drift down through the hills late at night, sending dogs into frenzies and ruining sleep for every soul who heard them. Whatever lived out there wasn't just hunting. It was slowly choking the life out of us. When the second person disappeared, everything changed. A teenager named Colby Hines went missing on his way home from a bonfire. They found his truck abandoned on the side of the road, the engine still running, headlights on. The front end was crumpled, as if it had hit something massive. The driver's door was clawed open, its edge twisted and peeled like a sardine can. In the woods nearby, searchers found Colby's flashlight, still working, and a shredded denim jacket hanging from a tree limb 8 feet off the ground, as if someone had placed it there on purpose. The body was found high up in a tree, a few hundred yards further in. What was left of it, anyway? That's when the whispers stopped. That's when people really started to realize that this thing was feeding on human flesh. The town tried to fight back. Hunting parties were formed. Groups of 6, sometimes 10, armed with rifles, dogs, and even a few thermal scopes borrowed through favors and old military buddies. Men combed the woods, laid bait traps and set up watchposts, convinced they could end this with enough firepower and determination. At first it felt like they were taking control, doing something righteous, but they weren't. I stayed out of it. Not because I wasn't scared or angry. I was. But I had a wife and daughter to think about. I couldn't afford to get myself killed running around the woods chasing something none of us understood. I had a duty to protect my home, not join some doomed crusade, so I kept my focus close to the land, reinforced the fences, reinforced the barn, walked the perimeter, and put out bear traps. My priority was survival, not glory, not revenge, and from what I saw, that turned out to be the smarter choice. Whatever that thing was, it always stayed one step ahead. Bear traps we buried deep in the brush were somehow sprung without a trace or ripped out of the ground entirely. Sometimes the bait was gone. At other times it was untouched, but the area around it would be marked with deep claw gouges in the trees, as if it were mocking us. More than once, the hunters returned to camp to find the perimeter ransacked. Not destroyed, just disturbed. Tents opened, food scattered, guns are broken or missing, and always those same prints in the dirt, too big for a man, too narrow for a bear, and shaped like hands with claws. It never touched the bait. Fresh deer carcasses, butcher's offal, even living goats staked out in circles of sensor lights. A few of the more stubborn ranchers and former military personnel attempted to outsmart it with sniper setups. They'd stake a carcass in a clearing, wire the area with motion sensors, and set up in hunting blinds on the ridgelines, waiting for hours, sometimes nights, for the thing to come in range. Every attempt failed. The bait remained untouched, like the creature knew it was being watched. No tracks, no damage, just the eerie stillness of a trap ignored. But the creature didn't forget. Days later, the men who'd tried to take it down found themselves targeted in ways that made the baiting attempts feel like a bad joke. Their homes were marked. Deep claw gouges across siding and door frames, smears of animal guts on their walls and windows. Barns were torn into, not for food, but to instill fear. Feed bins spilled, tack slashed to ribbons, gates left hanging off their hinges. It was as if the thing was saying, "I saw you, and now you'll see me." It never struck immediately. It waited. It watched. And when it came, it chose the moment that would hurt most. One man's horses were driven into the trees. One was later found eviscerated along a game trail. But the worst were the disappearances. 2 of the men who tried ambushing the thing vanished a few nights later. One was taken during a midnight walk to his barn, his flashlight still burning in the mud. The other, an old veteran named Eli Renshaw, was snatched clean out of his rocking chair in the living room. His wife had gone to bed early and found the front door smashed in at dawn, a single bloody boot lying in the hallway, and the chair still gently swaying. The man was later found in a ravine, just a few hundred yards from his home. I'll spare you the details, but it wasn't a pretty sight. It wasn't just the farms. The creature started coming to town, or at least close enough to make its point. Pets went missing from porches. The preacher's chicken coop was torn apart twice in a single week. Nobody could agree on what exactly the creature wanted, but everyone understood the message. People began to unravel. Men who had gone out on night patrols stopped talking. One by one, they pulled their kids out of school, sold their equipment, and quietly left. A few didn't leave by choice. Jimmy Farrell, who ran the gas station, disappeared after insisting he could track the bastard back to its nest. A week later, his torso was found 4 miles away on the shoulder of a logging road. What was left of his face was locked in a look of pure terror. His hunting rifle was mangled and bent beyond recognition. That's when folks started talking about werewolves and dogmen. Because whatever it wasn't just hunting for food. It was studying us. It understood our routines, learned where we were vulnerable, and struck with purpose. The creature went after those who challenged it, but never recklessly. That was the part that scared me the most. Generally, it favored animals, livestock, pets, things it could take without resistance or drawing much attention, as if it knew what would make headlines and what wouldn't. The handful of people who died or vanished were all connected in one way or another to efforts to hunt or trap it. It was selective, intentional. It did feed on them, but that didn't seem to be the point. It was revenge, plain and simple. And always, it seemed to leave just enough behind to be unmistakable, but not enough to bring in the state or the feds. Not yet. I kept my shotgun loaded and propped by the front door, never more than an arm's length away. Every night before bed, I'd make a slow loop around the house, flashlight in one hand, shotgun in the other, scanning the fence lines and tree line for any sign of movement. I dug shallow pits and laid crude traps, spike boards, wire snares, even old bear traps I'd pulled out of storage and reconditioned with rusted oil, but only around the house. I replaced the front and back doors with reinforced ones and added sturdy deadbolts. Motion lights went up, and I rigged noisemakers on the porch and windows, using soda cans and nails. But I wasn't out there looking to pick a fight. I didn't stalk the woods or set bait. I wasn't trying to be a hero. My goal was simple: survive the nights and keep my family breathing. Every choice I made came back to Beth and Sadie. I couldn't afford to go missing like the others. Couldn't risk them waking up one morning to find the front door clawed open and me gone. So I played defense, quiet, watchful, hoping that if I stayed out of its way, the thing would stay out of mine. Then one night, I ran into it. I was checking the edge of the property where the woods pressed in against the cattle trail. My spotlight caught something in the trees, and I gripped my shotgun tighter. For half a second, I thought I saw it. Its shape massive, standing upright, a distinct hump between its shoulders, eyes staring back at me. I didn't raise the shotgun, just kept it ready. Then it vanished. No sound, no motion. One blink and it was gone. That was the moment I realized. This thing wasn't afraid of us at all. It could have taken me right then and there if it wanted to, but it didn't. It watched me hesitate, and then it let me go. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed next to Beth, listening to every creak of the house, wondering why it had spared me. And in that wondering, something darker crept in. An idea I wasn't ready to face yet. Not then. Not until it came again. But the truth was already becoming clear. This wasn't a war. Wars have sides and winners. This thing wasn't trying to conquer us. It was proving that it didn't need to. And we weren't soldiers. We were prey. A few weeks later, I had my second encounter with the creature. These tense few seconds ultimately changed my life in a way I never could have imagined. The creature had spared me the first time I had seen it, and it had never come close to our house before, so I was not particularly worried about it at the time. For the first time in months, I had slaughtered a steer, dressing it, and hanging the cuts in the cold room out behind the barn. The heavy steel door sealed tight, and I figured no animal could smell through it. That night, I went out for a cut of beef, treating it like any other chore in a life full of hard work. The yard was still. The only sounds were the crunch of my boots on gravel and the slow pop of boards settling in the frost. I made it out to the cold room without any strange sightings, unlocked the heavy door, and closed it tight behind me. Inside, my breath fogged in the chill as I worked by the dim bulb, sawing off a generous slab for steaks. For a few minutes, I let myself relax in the cold silence, thinking only about the work in front of me. With a generous amount of meat in my hand, I pushed the door open and stepped back into the night, only to come face to face with the Ash Hollow stalker. For a long moment, I froze, the slab of meat dangling from my grip, certain this was how I would die. The creature stood on all fours, partially illuminated by the faint, distant porch light and the half-moon above. This creature was unlike anything I had ever seen. Its spine arched unnaturally, rising into a high, distinct hump between its shoulders that flexed and twitched with every breath, like an extra set of muscles coiled there for some reason I didn't understand. That hump was what set it apart from anything I'd seen in this world. Wolves didn't have it. Bears didn't have it. But this thing looked like it was built from an entirely different blueprint. Its fur was dense and wild across the shoulders, the hump, and all the way down its back, but patchy on the sides, as if the coat couldn't decide whether to grow or shed. Beneath the fur, the creature's dark flesh rippled with every slow, measured movement. Its head was long, but also broader than that of a wolf or dog. It had a snout like a wolf, but too short and somewhat uneven. Its lips curled back slightly, revealing crooked, yellow teeth, some sharp and jagged, others blunt like broken knives. Spit gleamed across its jowls. Its ears twitched to the faintest sounds. My breath, the rustle of the meat paper, the faint groan of the cold room door swinging shut behind me. But it never broke its stare. Its eyes glowed from deep within their sockets, not reflecting the light, but emitting it. Two slow-burning coals that fixed me in place, full of recognition and calculation. Suddenly, the creature pushed its massive upper body off the ground and rose onto two legs. It was the most terrifying sight I had ever experienced, an abomination straight out of a nightmare, forcing its form upright like a man, but never losing the animal menace. Even in that dim light, I could see its grotesque anatomy, a horrible hybrid of man and beast. Its limbs were thick and muscular. Its forearms nearly reached the ground as it stood there, hunched and swaying left to right. The arms ended in paws that were too large, too human-shaped, tipped with thick, curved claws that would have no trouble slicing human flesh. I knew what I was looking at. I didn't have to wonder, didn't need science or stories. The word came to me instantly, unbidden and absolute. Werewolf, not in the fairy tale sense, not some cursed man howling at the moon. Number. This thing was real. Sometime, somewhere, nature must have decided to try out a combination of man and wolf, and the result was standing right in front of me. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but I knew there was nowhere to go. The barn door was around the corner. The creature stood between me and the house, and I never thought to grab my shotgun when I went out the door. It was hopeless. We stared at each other. It took a step closer, silent as falling snow, then another. The smell of wet fur and earth filled my nostrils. Then it did something I hadn't expected. It cocked its head to the side like a curious dog, studying me with an intensity that was almost human. Its eyes narrowed slightly, and for a moment, I felt less like prey and more like a puzzle it was trying to solve. Then, with another slow step, the beast leaned in, lowering its muzzle toward me. I could hear the rasp of its breath as it began to sniff, drawing in the air around me as though memorizing my scent. Its nostrils flared, the sound wet and animal, and I felt the heat of its breath against my face. Every hair on my body stood on end as I tried to think of a way out. My knees nearly buckled, and I had completely forgotten the slab in my hand. Then, like a jolt, I remembered the meat, The reason I had come out here in the first place. Maybe that was what the werewolf was after. Slowly, carefully, I lifted it up, arm trembling as I held it out towards the beast. The creature's eyes followed the movement closely, its head tilting again, nostrils flaring as it drew in the scent. My breath caught, my chest barely moving as I whispered, "Take it." The creature closed the distance until only 4 feet separated us. It towered over me by at least a foot. My arms shook from the weight as much as the fear. But I did not drop the meat or break eye contact. For a heartbeat, it felt like time stopped, the two of us locked in a moment of decision. Then, in one swift motion, its hand shot out and snatched the beef from my hands. Not a lunge, not an attack, but a deliberate, controlled act. As it clutched the meat, it didn't retreat right away. Instead, it took another slow, deliberate step closer, lowering its massive head until its black nose hovered inches from my face. The beast sniffed loudly, its hot, fetid breath washing over my skin as if it was memorizing me. Its nostrils flared and twitched, and I could feel the damp touch of it almost grazing my cheek. I was frozen, paralyzed, my whole body locked in fear as its presence pressed against me, intimate and terrifying, before it finally began to draw back. I'm still surprised I managed not to piss myself back then. Finally, after almost a minute of sniffing, it backed away, eyes never leaving mine. It walked backwards, stuffed the meat in its mouth, dropped back to all fours, and melted into the dark as if it had never been there. I stood alone in the yard, heart hammering, my body trembling from the cold and the shock. I knew in that instant that something fundamental had shifted. The stalker could have easily killed me, but it had accepted what I offered instead. That wasn't a wild animal's reaction. It was a calculated move. We had struck a bargain. The next morning, I told Beth nothing. I just asked her to keep Sadie indoors after dark. A lot of what I had heard about the monster made sense now. Everyone else had tried to fight it and had nothing to show for it. I had found a better way. I had something this thing wanted, and it was seemingly smart enough to recognize an opportunity when it saw one. From that night onward, everything changed. I began leaving meat out at the edge of my property whenever I noticed signs of the werewolf. It took some time to learn its patterns, but I soon became able to tell when it was nearby. The livestock would grow restless, bunching up in the far corners of their pens, and the horses would snort and refuse to face the tree line. Even the frogs and crickets went quiet. That was when I would prepare a carcass or a sack of scraps and set it where the woods pressed closest to the pasture. The stalker kept returning every few nights, but never harmed my family or our livestock. Sometimes it came in silence, and the offering would be gone by morning, with nothing but claw prints pressed into the earth. At other times, it made its presence known. Branches snapped deliberately, guttural huffs carried across the yard, or a slow, circling pace just outside the lantern light. It was as if it wanted me to know it was there, to remind me of our arrangement. I never mistook those sounds for chance. They were signals. While my farm continued to operate as usual, the attacks persisted elsewhere. Neighboring farms lost sheep, goats, and cattle. Barns and back doors were torn open, and sometimes whole families abandoned their properties in the middle of the night, hoping for a better life in the city. One by one, people gave up, sold their land for whatever they could get, and moved away. I kept quiet, always watchful, and made offers on the abandoned farms. The prices were insultingly low, but fear had driven them out, and I had the cash and the motivation to buy and expand. Piece by piece, my property grew until I held more land than any coulter before me. Beth, my wife, noticed, of course. She saw the new land, the rapidly growing herd, and the way our lives and business seemed so prosperous compared to our neighbors. She asked me more than once what I was doing that others weren't. I showed so little concern about the beast that had been haunting the area for almost a year by then. I dodged her questions for weeks, but one night, after I'd had a few beers, Beth cornered me in the kitchen. She pressed me hard, her eyes sharp and insistent, and I realized I had no choice but to confess. I told her everything, how the beast had spared me, how I had fed it, and how it kept returning. She was silent for a long time, then finally nodded. Beth had always dreamed of more than scraping by. If feeding the stalker meant survival and prosperity, she would accept it. She promised to keep quiet. She never spoke of it again, not even to our daughter. For years I told no one else. Not my neighbors, not the sheriff, not the men who still marched into the woods with rifles and came back empty-handed, or not at all. They would never understand. To them it would sound like weakness or betrayal. To me it was survival. Over time the arrangement became almost routine. I provided food, and in return, the stalker left my farm untouched. It was an unspoken agreement, food for peace, terror traded for safety, and it has held to this day. But the truth is, the longer it went on, the heavier it weighed on me. I was profiting off this nightmare, buying up land from families who were too terrified to stay, growing richer while others buried their dogs, their livestock, sometimes even their kin. That guilt gnawed at me every night I left meat at the tree line. It's why, when the girl from California asked bluntly about the stalker, I slipped and told her the truth about feeding it. Some part of me wanted to unburden myself, to admit out loud what I had been doing. Lately, I've even caught myself thinking about telling the sheriff. Maybe, just maybe, my connection to the beast could be used to draw it out, to find a way to get rid of it for good. Because the truth is, Ash Hollow is dying, families are gone, businesses shuttered, and every night the woods grow quieter and darker. I can't shake the thought that my deal with the stalker is the reason why things have gotten so bad for the town.